finish up digital storytelling today. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. I'm going to tell you a little bit more about digital storytelling for marketing purposes. And when you're listening to this lecture, I want you to think about your social media strategy project as well, because I want you to use some of those principles in your project to make it a more effective marketing campaign. So when you're listening to these lectures, please listen to them with the project in mind, because the main goal of this course is to get you prepared to create a good social media strategy and use social media for effective marketing. All right, let's continue. Storytelling becomes story giving. So when I say that, what we mean is that brands are no longer just creating the stories themselves, but they are engaging with their community, and they are letting their consumers tell the story of the brand. So this is basically community collaboration of the brand, and you're empowering the consumers to become word-of-mouth marketers for your brand. And in this case, you are using your consumers' user-generated content, and you are integrated their content into your overall narrative, and you're building upon your conversation with your target audiences. Of course, there's the influencer partnership and sponsorship, but I'm not talking about that necessarily. So that is another thing that a lot of brands are doing now, partnering with influencers, but it's more effective when you have customers who are using your products and they want to share their own stories. They want to tell the other customers what their experience was like with that brand. So when the consumers tell their stories, then it gives more credibility and authenticity to the brand's message. So it helps deliver the message in a more organic way, and it's a lot more effective. A good example of that was the Blair Witch Project. If you have seen the movie, this was a movie that was created basically by the users, by the consumers. So there were people who volunteered to be in the movie, and they were given cameras, and they were basically getting their own footage in the middle of some forest environment, like in the woods. And the producers were only observing a little bit, but they were allowed to do everything. It was a pretty big hit, and audiences couldn't tell if the footage was real or if it was staged in many parts of the movie. So I don't know if you've ever seen it, but it was from 1999. But that was the first time that a brand used the consumers to tell the story. So instead of telling the story to the consumers were the ones who were telling the story. So again, stories enable users to build their own personal stories, and when other people can view them, it makes a more effective marketing. There was an interview by Mike Manella. Mike Manella was one of the producers of the Blair Witch Project. He's also working for the Campfire marketing agency. So they asked him, how would you break down what storytelling is for a brand? And one of the things he said is that the reality is that a brand is a combination of the story the brand tells and the experience that people have of every aspect of the brand. So he said the story and the brand has to be aligned, or like the story and the experience must be aligned. So a brand can't just talk about helping people and then the product or the behavior of the company doesn't reflect that. That's not going to be effective. And he said the brands are no longer what they say they are, but brands are what people say they are. So storytelling for a brand is a combination of what they say about themselves and how people experience every aspect of what the brand does. So for example, Apple and Nike are good examples of that. People are advocates of Apple versus Samsung, for example. And with Nike, a lot of athletes do advertise and advocate for Nike, right? They also asked Mike Manello, I'm sorry that I'm looking at this other screen that I have because that's where the slides are. So another question they asked Mike Manello was, how did storytelling turn into story giving? And he said, story giving is not really a codified thing. It's more a creative approach to how we develop our ideas and experiences. It's really a phrase I use, he said, to get people to think about not just the story, but how the story is experienced. So he said something that I thought was very important. He said, don't just tell a story, give people a story to tell. So put the people at the center, not your story or the brand at the center. So he said, stories are how we remember things, but experiences are how we acquire our most personal and meaningful stories. So it's really important. And he also recommended that quality is more important over quantity. So instead of throwing out low-grade content, you should really look for good quality content, even though it's not as many. So another thing you can do with storytelling and engaging your consumers to tell your story is to create microsites. Microsites are dedicated platforms that Microsites are dedicated platforms that host community discussion, and it's a subset of the Brain's main website. So, and a good example of a microsite is, for example, Burberry started this microsite called artofthetrench.com. And what they were doing in that website was they were encouraging consumers to share their own images or their own photographs of themselves when they are wearing the classic Burberry trench coat, and they wanted them to share their relaxed moments with the trench coat. And people really got engaged in that website. And of course, when you do that, you're not necessarily advertising your product, but you're allowing the consumers to advertise your product. They're just sharing their own comfortable moments with the trench coat. You can see one riding a bike with the trench coat and so on. Another example of that was Tiffany and Company, and they created a website called whatmakeslovetrue.com. And in this website, people were, of course, these are older. So nowadays people can do that on Instagram, social media, but this was when websites were still very popular. And what they did was they were asking the users to share their own love stories and maybe how their boyfriend proposed to them with a ring. So they're not necessarily advertising Tiffany and Company, but they are allowing other people to share their own love stories. And these are real customers. And it really, I mean, they are sponsoring the website. So they are the owner of the website. It is their sub channel to reach the consumer, but it is clear of any kind of clutter from advertising or like the push style advertisements, but it is just an organic consumer created content. And those microsites can become very effective, but you're also allowing the community who have similar interests to interact with each other. So if you want to create a microsite or develop a community for your brand, there are 4 steps you need to follow. And this is what a lot of people are doing now. A lot of brands are doing this. So the first thing is the approach and setting goals. You have to set measurable goals and determine how to approach the brand's community. Second step is reaching the brand's community. Run your microsite as a type of public forum that invites members to share their own views. And number 3 is common thread community. So this is a virtual co-creation platform. So you're collaborating with your consumers, but they're actually doing their own individual sharing, and they are uniting with other individuals with common interests. And number 4 is motivation or incentive to co-create. So you can give your customers certain incentives to create content for that microsite. So let's just go into each of those steps and dig a little bit further. So for example, for the first step, there are a couple questions that you really need to answer. One is, how does the brand's community relate to the brand itself? What value does the brand story provide to the community? And what are some of the measurable outcomes that will best support the brand's overall mission and message? So you want to create a platform that the community can relate to, that they will be interested in. Okay, and you set your goals, you set measurable outcomes. Second one is reaching the brand's community. So the platform could run as a type of public forum that invites members to share their views on a variety of brand topics as part of the community. So you want to develop a social sharing community based on user-generated content, and that requires community participation. You need to keep that in mind. You want to be able to get the community to participate. If you are trying to create a relationship based on social sharing, that requires consumers to engage not only from story sharing, but also by interacting with the other community members. And this community will focus on contributing to the brand's story. So instead of customer reviews, you have members share their images of themselves using the products and so on. And step 3 is the common thread community. So you are trying to bring people together who have common interests, and there should be no influence from the host or from the brand on this community. So you're allowing that community to engage with themselves in a free and more organic format. And number 4 is motivation or incentive to co-create. So you can give incentives in the form of extrinsic motivation to the consumers. That could be something with monetary value, gifts, prizes, or something that the consumers will get out of this. And an intrinsic motivation is that your customers individually just desire to be a part of the community. They want to have a sense of belonging because of the brand that you have created, because you have created a brand where people really want to be a part of. And also, you know, you're creating some kind of motivation where people would be really interested in doing for your brand. Diesel had a pretty successful campaign like that, which would be a really good example of an intrinsic motivation. They did the AZ of dance. So let me see if I can play this.
Okay, you want my trust number like I'm up in the top. Well, they want to me like I'm Kansas City. Me on that hip hop before I was like that, but I'm over some deals and I'm like another one. Other people look at stuff you want to put my chins up, raise the bar, young phenomenon. I make a deal, not to commercialize you want to fire bomb. The bomb thinking you got your bomb still, and you tell your men, show me, hey, who's like the what it is, what is up, what is what it do, what it on. What it is, what is up, what is what it do, what it don't, what. I'm getting like I might be like
So basically, people who are wearing diesel jeans are posting their own videos of dancing, and it got a lot of interest. So that's a good example of creating this kind of micro community or microsite. Oh, I want to watch it. All right, so that was a good example of that. Another way of doing something that is not necessarily a push style direct marketing, but it is the social good marketing. So social good marketing is generally done by like companies with philanthropic causes or charitable actions, and they want to use the power of storytelling to reach wider audiences in the digital environment. So generally, they have the goal of creating positive or lasting impact on the environment, or encouraging other people to contribute to the cause, and also maybe participate in the company's agenda. So a good example of that is Ford Motor Company. They actually took on this issue of people trying to go on social media while they're driving. And we talked about the fear of missing out. This is actually a problem when you're driving, because people are so addicted to social media that sometimes they are going on social media or on their phones while they're driving, and it's a huge problem. So Ford took this on, and they created a campaign, and they posted something on their Instagram account saying, "Go further responsibly. Please don't like and drive." And that became pretty popular. So that was a good example of a social good marketing. Another one is The Giving Keys by the singer Caitlin Crosby. So what that was, The Giving Keys was a company that refashioned old keys into some kind of accessory or jewelry that is engraved with inspiring words or inspiring messages. And so people were encouraged to pay it forward and give their keys to those who may need it more in the future. So it was a social good campaign that relied on storytelling to deliver its intended message. And it started with a single key that has the word love, for example, engraved on it. And then it became a profitable business that started touching lives of other people in need. So people started to buy those and give it to other people. Another example is the Crochet Kids International. This started in Uganda and Peru, and there were three guys who loved crocheting, and they had a talent for it. So they tried to empower others and mentor them and educate them to create their own crochet apparel, knit products, and they encourage them to sell those products for their own good. So so those are good examples of that. And digital storytelling can be used in more creative ways to market your product. But I want you guys to think about that, and to think about creating some kind of immersive experience for your consumer, so that you can effectively advertise and let your brand be known. Okay, we're going to finish here, and I am going to start the new chapter next week. But we are also getting a little bit more into your social media strategy project. I'm going to post another lecture video for that this week. All right, see you guys next class.